Welcome to another lecture by MedicoMedics, Learning Made Easy. Anatomy, Chapter 1, Introduction to Anatomy. So in this lecture, we will define anatomy and its importance in medicine. We will explain anatomical terminology and orientate ourselves. Understand planes of the body and anatomical positions. We will go through recognizing body cavities and their significance, and end with a brief overview of tissue types. Now, anatomy is the study of the structure of the body and its parts. When we study anatomy, we talk about types of anatomy. We have gross anatomy, where we study structures visible to the naked eye. When we study microscopic anatomy, we're studying structures observed under a microscope, for example, cells and tissues. We have developmental anatomy, where we study the body's development. Furthermore, we have comparative anatomy, where we compare human anatomy with other species. Now, when we begin to study anatomy, the first thing we need to become familiar with is our starting point. And in anatomy, we call it the anatomical position. The anatomical position is a standard reference for describing the location of different body parts. And here you have a beautiful illustration of the anatomical position. So it features standing upright, feet slightly apart, arms at the sides, palms facing forward, and head facing forward. This is the anatomical position. So moving on to anatomical terminology. Anatomical terminology are standardized terms used to describe body parts, positions, and movements. Some important terms include superior and inferior. These also go by cranial and caudal. Here you have an illustration where superior is above, or we also say cranial, and we have inferior or caudal. Then we have anterior and posterior. So anterior in front, posterior behind. For anterior, we also use ventral, and for posterior, we use dorsal. We also have medial and lateral. We have proximal, distal. We have superficial and deep. And in the next slide, we will look at each of these with an illustration to help. So first, we have proximal and distal. Now, distal, you can remember it by distance. So it's away from us something, while proximal is proximate to something. So when we say the bicep muscle is proximal to the heart, we would then say that the hand or your palms are distal to your heart. So you choose a point of reference. Let's say you're talking about the heart, or you're talking about some other organ. Whatever it is, that's your starting point. Now, whatever you're going to identify, let's say the bicep muscle, and you're going to compare it with the palms, one of these is proximal to the heart, one is distal. Whichever one is furthest away, moving away from this starting point, is the distal one. Another is medial and lateral. So just like we said, we have the anatomical position. We have made this imaginary line running straight down. That's not a straight line, but you get the point. Now, when we say something is medial, we mean that it's closer to the mid-line. When we say it's lateral, we mean it's moving away from that line. Now let's talk about the planes of the body. So we have the sagittal plane, where we divide the body into left and right. So we have that illustration here. So when we're talking about the sagittal plane, or we have a sagittal view of something, we know that whatever we're talking about has been separated to left and right. However, did you pick up on a mistake I just made? Because if you saw this image I just drew, although it's not a beautiful picture, but you get the point, I put left here and right here, which makes sense. You right now are looking at this image probably on your television screen or your computer. To me, recording this, or to you watching it, this is left, right? And this is right. But remember, when we are looking at a patient, we are looking at them from the anatomical position, which means our right is actually the patient's left from our perspective. So in actuality, this is right and this is left. Sit with that for a few seconds to make sure that you grasped the concept. Now, after sagittal plane, we have the coronal or frontal plane. This is where we divide the body into anterior and posterior. Here is a view of the frontal plane. So we will have the anterior here, and behind it, we will have the posterior. Furthermore, we also have the transverse plane, or the horizontal plane, where we divide the body into superior and inferior, seen here. This part will then become the inferior part, this part becomes the superior part. Now, body cavities. So we have the dorsal cavity. And in the dorsal cavity, we have the cranial cavity, which contains the brain. And we have the spinal cavity, which contains the spinal cord. Furthermore, we have the ventral cavity, where we find the thoracic cavity, which contains the heart and lungs. We have the abdominopelvic cavity, which covers or contains the abdominal cavity, containing the digestive organs. Also, the pelvic cavity, which contains the reproductive organs. Moving on then, we have the regional anatomy. So the human body is divided into regions for study. We have the head and neck, the thorax, the abdomen, pelvis, upper and lower limbs, and the back. And in this illustration here, you can see these. We have the head and neck here. We have the abdomen and pelvis here. We have the thorax here. We have the upper and lower limbs, right? So we have the upper limb covered here, and we have the lower limbs here in purplish color. And in this image, you can see the back. Now, introduction to tissues. So when we talk about tissues, we have four basic tissue types. We have epithelial tissue, which covers body surfaces and lines cavities. And here is an illustration of epithelial tissue. Furthermore, we have connective tissue, which provides support. And you can see an illustration here. We have muscle tissue, which enables movement. And we have nervous tissue, which facilitates communication and control. Now, this is just to present a little overview. Do not feel the need to memorize anything right now, since all of this will be repeated many times over. Now, what is the importance of anatomy? Well, it is essential for understanding the human body in health and disease. It is the basis for clinical examinations, imaging, and surgical procedures. And it builds the foundation for all medical and allied health studies. So in summary then, anatomy studies the structure of the body. Anatomical terminology and planes are essential for describing the body. Body cavities house vital organs and protect them. Understanding tissues is foundational for comprehending organ structure and function. And that's the end of the first lecture. Continue now to Chapter 2.